Thanks, Silipan. Again, good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. First of all, thanks for taking time out to join our year-end, potentially flagship webinar, where we plan to discuss what to expect in 2025 from technology and business process services perspective across various sourcing models, GBS, GCC, third party, and of course, a combination. Specifically, we'll start with getting a sense of enterprise sentiments in terms of their business outlook and challenges for 2025. In that backdrop, then we want to share 5 key trends that are expected to play out in the IT business process services market. And lastly, taking all these into account, we plan to share 5 actions that enterprises must consider and execute to capture most value from their global services initiatives. I must also share that the insights for today's webinar that you're going to see are drawn from multiple sources of our proprietary research, including just concluded global study where approximately 200 large enterprises participated to share their outlook, their considerations. We have baked that in with our ongoing research in all these areas to bring to light and share what we expect to happen in 2025. With that, let me invite Alicia to talk about what are we finding in terms of the enterprise sentiments and business outlook for 2025. Alicia.
Thank you, Rajesh. So time for the big reveal, time for, drum rolls. What we see happening for 2025 from an enterprise sentiment perspective is a very positive perception that enterprises have about the business growth for 2025, which is obviously a very, very good news. And it becomes even better as we look at the trends from the last few years. The optimism seems to be on the rise. More and more organizations are becoming more optimistic about the future. And as we think about 2025, majority of the organizations are feeling more positive about what's in store for 2025. Now, the fun part here, Rajesh, is as we look at the challenges behind their expectations, those haven't changed. The cost and margin pressures, adapting to very, very rapidly changing customer needs, slowdown in demand in certain areas. In fact, they expect to see more pressure from a regulation standpoint in certain geographies or geopolitical and location risk. All of those were the similar challenges that organizations had last year as well. And largely, those remain the same challenges for the next year. But what has really changed is their preparedness to handle these challenges and also potentially the intensity of some of these challenges in certain areas. Net of it resulting in organizations feeling a lot more prepared as they enter 2025, a lot more positive about achieving their business objectives. And on that aspect, these business objectives are also twofold. They want to achieve growth, but they want to achieve profitable growth. So top line and bottom line, both of them, keeping them healthy, keeping them strong is the main objective that enterprises are focusing on across the board. And this is something that we saw unanimously across all the geographies, all the industries. On one side, their priority is to drive more profitability, to invest in initiatives that can enhance their cost optimization agenda, that can drive their cost optimization agenda. On the other hand, there are also pockets of growth that they are trying to look for. They're trying to drive more revenue. They're trying to invest in innovation, drive better customer experience to have a better engagement with the customer, enhance their brand reputation. But at the same time, also identify areas for optimization of cost, drive down people cost, improve productivity using technology, or in terms of using a different location and shoring mix. So essentially, there's a lot of balancing out that organizations are trying to do. And all of this isn't new. if you think about last year, some of these trends were same, but what has really changed is the organizations thinking about how to manage these ever changing dynamics, geopolitical on one hand and the economic situation on other hand, and a lot of other dynamics that tends to play out. Rajesh.
Oh, great. Alicia, thanks for kind of setting it up, right? You mentioned a couple of times about the geopolitical situation. So, time to get some input from the audience here. Um, we have a poll question. You will see that popping up on your screen. The question is, how do you expect the changing political environment across major economies to impact your business in 2025? And just to give you a sense of that, approximately 42% of the world's GDP was generated by countries that held national elections in 2024. And it included some of the key demand geographies. Of course, one of the largest is US, and one of the largest or the largest delivery or offshore delivery location, India, right? So for sure, 2024 went through some big political decisions. Some places the current administration were retained, some places new administration came in, and we are just curious to understand how do you see impacting your business. I think everyone has responded and the results are out. So it's a very interesting mix, right? Seems like a classic divided house of sorts, uh, with a sense of positivity, if I were to see it this way, right? Because I believe limited impact, I can take it a kind of a this okay, right? Business as usual. But 49% believes it will have a positive impact. 36% it will believe that it can have a negative impact. Uh, Very few, only 5% believe that it's going to be a significant negative impact. Alicia, do you want to comment on, how do you see this, right? What is your interpretation of this? What is our view on some of these changing geopolitical dynamics?
Yeah, and Rajesh, you talked about some of the major geographies that were undergoing these political changes in the current year, and talking specifically about say Trump administration that's beginning to prepare for January 2025. I think there are a lot of different factors that are playing out. The import tariffs, for example, or the deregulations, or the federal spend cuts that are expected. Localization has been an agenda on the government's mind for long in the last tenure as well. Much like what we see on the response here, I think some of our other studies also indicate that the impact is going to vary depending upon the kind of industry the organizations are in. So, for example, if we are talking about some of the service oriented industries, the deregulation or the impact import on tariffs, those are going to have not a negative impact, rather in some cases it's going to have a positive impact. So a net positive impact is what we feel is going to be, at least in the US, for some of the service oriented industries. However, as we think about the asset heavy industries, the product oriented industries, say a retail or manufacturing, that's where some of the import tariffs or the localization and some of the others may actually have a net negative impact. So I think I concur with what we are seeing on the poll question here. In certain cases, it will be positive depending upon the industry you're in. In certain cases, it will be negative. Also, depending upon the geography, not just the industry. So I think it is going to be a mixed bag of experience from a political environment standpoint.
Yeah, okay, Alicia. So what you're saying is it depends, right? It's a kind of function of uh, geographic exposure that you have, the function of the kind of industry that you are in, the kind of business portfolio that you got, so on and so forth. Okay, so this is good, right? So we understand. Seems like I mean, on a net basis, positive sentiment by enterprises going into 2025, right? Um, With that, of course, the first big question, and rather the mega question is, hey, what will be the impact of some of these on the overall IT business process services market, right? So I'm going to invite Rishi to talk about what is our outlook for the global services industry as we enter 2025.
Thank you, Rajesh. So I think the initial poll question sets the context for what's going to be the outlook, right? At an overall level, the global services industry, it will benefit from the optimism that we see across the buyers, right? And this is quite encouraging as after a period of muted growth for the past 2 years that we have seen in the industry, we anticipate that this industry will now witness, will now start growing at a moderate pace moving forward. And before I get into what's the growth estimate, how does the growth estimate looks like, let me talk about some of the factors which will fuel this growth, right? So one, the positive sentiment, that's a big factor. Buyers are also looking at global services as a medium to reduce cost, which again, Ajisha, you talked about, is a key priority for enterprises, right? Additionally, they recognize that buyers recognize that global services play an important role in digital transformation as well as driving revenue growth in some cases, whether be it through new product development or by entering newer markets, right? So with that context, as we move to the next slide, you will see that approximately 55% of the buyers, they expect their global services budget to increase. And at the same time, this is in stark contrast to the share of respondents who expect it to decrease, which is less than 10% or so. What's particularly interesting to note is the sharp rise in the share of buyers which anticipate a significant budget increase. So if you see this on the chart on the left, rising from 6% last year to 18% this year. And the net of it, uh, the global services industry is expected to grow at close to 7% or slightly over 7% in 2025, which is more than double the growth rate that was predicted last year.
Thanks,
Uh,
Rishi. Yeah, sorry.
no, go ahead, Rajesh. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. One of the things that struck me is, of course, the organization, we say, hey, cost is continue to be a good, it will be a pressure point. And the other side, we see kind of the budget to increase, right? Generally, in a cost constrained environment, the budget decreases. What it points to us is organizations do see greater value capture opportunity through global services, right? And that is again play into the cost optimization, but also play into the revenue part of the picture. So it's a kind of a testament of the value global services has demonstrated and is expected to demonstrate in 2025. Is that a kind of fair assessment?
Yes. So while it's a cost constrained environment, it's also a revenue growth outlook. So that is weighing into higher spends on global services.
Okay.
So with that, Rajesh, let's look into which of the market segments is expected to grow. And again, interestingly, this year we see both the market segments, be it outsourcing or be it in-house through GCCs, are poised for growth next year. This is again slightly different from the outlook we had last year, where the GCC model was expected to grow at a faster rate as compared to outsourcing. So we will likely to see rebalancing of growth across the both of our enterprises firing on both the engines going forward. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, and I think that thanks. Go ahead, Amit. Because part of that says, hey, how will that translate into let's focus on the third party, right? Which is, Alicia, I think, yeah. Amit, over to you.
Correct. Yeah. So, Rajesh, one interesting thing which we saw during our research as well, that uh, both GCCs and outsourcing uh, models are going to be preferred by enterprises, right? So the growing global services budget is going to be allocated properly to both the models. Now, when we look at it from a third-party provider perspective, the provider market had seen very unprecedented growth in 2021 and 2022 when it came to outsourcing demand, right? Whereas in 2023, we saw a subdued growth in demand for outsourcing. And when we are seeing 2024 coming to an end, we are also seeing that the market size might only grow by, let's say, around 2%. Uh, Although the market crossed a trillion dollar mark this year, but still the growth has been very low. One of the reasons can be the uncertainty in the market, right? Actually, it was a major reason behind this subdued growth. The sentiment which was amongst enterprises was very murky. I mean, definitely there is the reason of high base, which came from the unprecedented growth in 2021, but still there was that uncertainty which caused this dip in growth. Uh, what we are seeing in 2025, though, is owing to the optimism which we spoke about in the initial slides, there is certain type of that sentiment where enterprises have some positivity regarding their business growth. And this might translate into the demand for outsourcing to be grown, resulting into the industry also growing by somewhere around 5% is what we estimate, and it might stabilize to that in the coming years. So that is something which we are expecting to happen when we say that there is supposed to be a rebound in growth in 2025. Then, while we have now spoken about the sourcing models and also outsourcing industry market at large, let's also talk a bit about the headcount growth and how do we see it panning out across various geographies. Now, in the previous slide, we saw that the outsourcing industry is expected to grow at around 5%. But if you compare that to the headcount growth that you see in front of you, it is only supposed to be growing at half, half half of what the outsourcing industry is expected to grow. So that is somewhere between 2 to 3%. Now, this expectation of subdued growth is one reason is due to the strong focus of enterprises, which is around gaining productivity through technology adoption, instead of just growing their headcount to enhance the profitability. And how do they intend to do that is this productivity improvement is expected to come from AI and automation, where they intend to leverage technologies like Gen AI, which Alicia will speak in detail later on, and also something which is revolving around agentic AI, which we will touch upon in the next few sections. But all said and done, although the headcount growth is expected to be less, but enterprises are still planning to leverage nearshore and offshore locations. This is owing to the persisting challenge of cost and margin pressures, which are still existing and which we spoke about earlier in the discussion. Over to you, Rajesh.
No, thanks, Amit. Again, I think the key point here is the industry is expected to come out of its slump, as we talked about. But again, the expectation is higher, right? Expectation is to kind of deliver more value without adding a lot of headcount. That's the expectation. Now, as we saw, enterprises are planning to leverage both the GBS, GCC, and third-party model to achieve their objectives. Rishi, how do you see the interplay between these two panning out in 2025? Rishi, you are on mute.
That's a great question, Rajesh. And in fact, we are hearing this a lot from both the buyers and the providers. So at a broad level, we expect enterprise leaders will increasingly collaborate with providers for various stages of their GCC journey. And on the other hand, providers are also showing a strong willingness to actively support GCC related agendas to create and thus creating a mutually beneficial ecosystem for both the enterprises and the providers. If we start looking at it with in some depth, so there are primarily four areas where buyers are engaging with providers on GCCs, starting with GCC transformation, managed services or staff augmentation, GCC setups, as well as GCC carve-outs or divestitures in some cases. Let me get into each of them one by one and which of them are expected to grow faster compared to the other. So starting with the GCC transformation, this is an area which is likely to experience the fastest growth, driven by enterprises' need on digital transformation, innovation. So some of the key focus areas here will include technology modernization, AI implementation, and as GCCs take a lead in those, they would we expect that they would increasingly collaborate with partners for some of these initiatives, right? Further, we also see providers playing a big advisory role in GCC transformation, helping them redefine their sourcing strategy, helping them uh, defining the overall GCC strategy to align that to ensure that they are aligned to the long-term business objectives. Next, if I move to the supporting GCCs during their operations phase through managed services and staff augmentation, that would be another key growth area. So talent shortages, particularly for niche skills, will push enterprises to rely on providers for managed services and staff augmentation, even for services which are being supported via the GCCs. So providers are also expected to help GCCs manage some of the demand fluctuation and help them in supporting their agenda for end-to-end services delivery. Right. So this will help GCCs in ensuring that they maintain the operational efficiency while addressing some of the issues around skill gaps or demand fluctuations, etc. Uh, Rajesh, at the same time, what we see is the GCC setups have been pretty strong over the past 2 years, and it has been quite notable with more than 50% of these setups being supported by providers across different modes like big doctor transfer, virtual or assisted captives. That's again something that we expect will continue to be a big focus area in 2025. And finally, if we move to the diverse teachers, so we have seen that happening. Some underperforming GCs, we have seen diverse teachers of some underperforming GCs in the past, and this will continue in 2025 and beyond. But in my view, and at least the response, at least the output from these buyers as well, this is likely to be the an area which will be muted growth as compared to some of the others.
No, thanks, Rishi. Thanks for outlining these. And before we get into the offer, okay, let's talk about the offer first. So for all the participant registrants here, the folks who have decided to join, we do have an offer for you. This offer is exclusively for the buy side, enterprise side. We are offering complimentary report curated for your department based on this particular study. You will see that to get to you as a New Year gift sometime in mid-January, you will have to kind of indicate your interest in that. You'll see a link come your way probably right now and also as part of the post-webinar follow-up. So look to that and hope you can kind of avail that offer. Okay. Actually, let me kind of take one question, right? Because some of you have submitted questions as part of registration. Some of you are kind of posting the questions here. Great. Love the way to kind of keep the engagement going. Just going back to the GCC part, right? One of this question is, hey, what are the compelling reasons to build a GCC when partnership with providers are arguably strong and services have been reliable? I mean, put the other way, why would organizations, set up their own GCC, especially in a kind of cost conscious environment?
So that's again a very pertinent question, and it reflects a decision or dilemma which many enterprises grapple with at times, right? And there are multiple reasons why enterprises are considering to build their own GCCs, Rajesh. First is it's it's now it is very easier than ever before to set up and manage GCCs. The barriers to entry have really gone down thanks to the well established ecosystem that you have, which also includes the provider partnership that we talked about, right? Also, the time to maturity for a GCC and the minimum threshold requirement for viability has gone down, which is fueling the growth for GCCs, not just with larger enterprises, but with smaller and mid-sized enterprises, right? Additionally, GCCs, they are perceived to offer greater alignment with the enterprise value system, long-term goals, more flexibility, and then higher ownership and control over the process. So that's fueling the growth. And the third thing is the value of the previously outsourcing work, which was so with the technology playing a big role there, the distinction between core and non-core has diminished, and the outsourcing work is now being perceived as more strategic and wherein the desire to gain control and ownership over some of those work as well, which was previously outsourced. So Rajesh, in my view, those are three key factors that is leading to enterprises increasingly set up more GCCs.
Okay, thanks, Rishi. So we'll keep on moving. Why don't we move to the third trend, which is uh, which is around IT ops integration. Very interesting. Alicia, what do we have here?
Yeah, as you said, Rajesh, excuse me. As you said, the next big thing that we believe will happen in is really this IT and the ops part coming together to be able to drive a lot more business outcomes at scale and at speed. Let me explain what that really means. Over the last decade or so, we have seen a lot of technology interventions, a lot of adoption of technology by organizations. What they're realizing now is that technology and business aren't separate. Tech is business, business is tech. All of this is coming together. It's technology is powering most of the business. And for them to be able to evolve with a rapidly changing business environment, address the changing customer expectations, deliver the right experience at scale and at speed, they're realizing that they need to bring together the IT and business more closely with each other to be able to work more collaboratively, more effectively, and achieve their business outcomes at scale. And that's one of the reasons what you see on the slide here, that increased IT ops integration became one of the top 5 levers that organizations are expecting to use to achieve their business objectives in 2025. This is what in some, there are various words to it. Product-led operating model is what we call this, to be the way organizations are moving. And what's interesting is that it is not a technology change only. While over the last decade, technology investment has largely been a technology change or primarily been a technology change, this adopting a product-led operating model goes lot beyond technology. It has elements of the reorganization of the structure in which people work, bringing the IT and business together, focused on a particular product centered around the customer experience and customer expectations. It also then entails redefining the processes around which they work and not following the traditional processes anymore, but really centered again around the same product. Of course, powered by a lot of technology to make automation, to leverage automation and drive outcomes at scale. And then to work in all of this, it also requires reshaping of talent. The mindset and the skill set of people working in a product-led operating model, therefore, also undergoes a change. And all of this put together, the metrics to measure success for these teams, therefore, also undergoes a change. So if you see, it is a massive organizational changes that we see happening for organizations to adopt this product-oriented operating model. And we did a lot of study. We went into details to understand what is the end outcomes that they have achieved or they plan to achieve. So for those organizations who have been successful in the recent past or who have already embarked on this journey, there have been strongly positive outcomes that they have realized across different dimensions. Top line impact, a more than 26% increase in revenue and profitability. Bottom line impact in terms of reduction in operational cost, improvement in their time to market, improvement in their customer experience, the CSAT score, improvement even in their employee satisfaction. So across different dimensions, they have achieved very strong positive reaction and positive outcomes from this entire transformation. So this is one of the key trends that we see happening in the coming year. Organizations investing more and more into adopting a product-led operating model. And it's not a project that they have to invest in. It's a journey. It's typically a multi-year long journey that they start now and then go about it in phases and mature. And it's a, shifting milestone. They'll keep identifying new areas and new processes and new segments that they need to adopt this model to keep driving more digital transformation and addressing their client requirements. Rajesh.
No, thank you very much, Anisha. So it's clear, right? The IT and ops is in a kind of on a journey to kind of come together to unlock value, right? Of course, when we talk about unlocking value, uh, there's you can't be contemporary or future ready unless you talk about Gen AI. So what is our view on Gen AI and its future avatars and versions?
Yeah, absolutely, Rajesh. Of course, it's not a new theme anymore. It's been it's been the center of discussion for every conversation for more than 2 years. But it's been equally elusive for these all of these years as well. Despite that, what we believe is, despite these initial hiccups, it remains a key investment area for organizations. We all know that a lot of investments were done in the last 2 years in experimentation and POCs and pilots, etc. As many as 70% of these POCs actually failed to reach production stage. Either they were not viable from a finance standpoint, from an ROI standpoint, or there were too many risks involved, or the organization required the maturity of the organization to adopt it at scale were not there. So essentially, there are three key challenges that we saw enterprises uncover for themselves in terms of why they failed or why they believe they cannot scale a particular use case for generative AI. They were either questions around uncertainty, or they were concerns around uncertainty, or they were unprepared to adopt this transformative technology, or it was just unaffordable for them in some cases. Broadly, these were the three areas where organizations were failing to have a clear answer, and thereby some of these, almost 70% of the POCs did not achieve production stage. Another very interesting or important area or important concern that we saw is the concern around handling risk. So a lot of organizations realize that they are potentially exposing themselves to the unknown and this powerful technology that they don't understand fully. And coupled with that, a lot of other regulatory requirements, they're just not ready to take on that risk, to take on that quality challenge. And that's something that is becoming a very important, a very major hindrance for them to be able to adopt some of these technologies at scale. However, as we think about 2025, again, there is a ray of hope there. Generative AI is one of the top 5 spend areas, and also the number one area where the spend is expected to increase, which very strongly indicates enterprise mindset to invest in scale, to invest in establishing certain foundational capabilities. There are a lot of investments that have happened around data modernization, around identifying the right partner for them, etc. A lot of those groundwork being done. 2025 could be a very important milestone for this entire journey of generative AI that started about 2 years ago. And 2025 could be the year where we start seeing some major significant investments happening at scale by organizations. We are already seeing, almost 54% of enterprises looking for partners and suppliers to integrate generative AI into their estate. or they are investing massively into skilling. So there is, in pockets, there are investments happening, and we believe this is the year when we start seeing some good success stories.
Okay, so Alicia, what you're saying is, of course, there's a huge promise here. The size of the prize can be significant. Last 2 years, there has been a lot of learnings, uh, but the desire to capture value has not abated, right? That is resulting into organizations decision, or seems like thinking to continue to kind of spend. However, it is also very clear that it is not going to be you know a lot of pilots and POCs. The focus and attention is going to or probably already shifted to figuring out and putting all the attention where we can scale by focusing on some of the foundational themes that you talked about, which probably we have not addressed fully in the first 2 years, right? So, and then again, taking it to a scale also requires a set of investment not only in terms of the capital, but also the effort, the organization, the change management, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the key. That's also a very good segue then into the next poll that we have for this audience, where we want to know, where have you adopted Gen AI at scale? So within your organization, where have you adopted Gen AI at scale? Again, just to be clear, we are not asking you to indicate where you have done a lot of pilots, where you have having some, you know, initial success in a lab environment. We are really interested in understanding uh, your adoption of Gen AI at scale. Uh, and let's see what our audience reply. Because one of the other thing is also very clear, from our conversations, from our work with a lot of the enterprises, they don't want to know just the art of the possible, right? They want to know where it is happening so that they can adopt fast and capture value, right? So hopefully, folks are responding, and we will have the results pretty soon. It will be interesting to see what comes out. Okay. Okay. So at one level, not surprising, customer service, which, of course, the chat GPT, just the chat part of the verbiage itself and the way you interacted. So customer service is 1/3 of respondents are saying that they have adopted Gen AI at scale as related to customer service, followed up by industry specific operations. That's interesting. Uh, because from our vantage point, what we are seeing is definitely customer service is one area. The other place where we are seeing enough attention and scaled up use cases are coming is sales and marketing, right? In this poll, it is coming at the fourth, roughly, and I think the second, third, and fourth industry specific operations, IT and sales and marketing are roughly in the same ballpark. Uh, in fact, in industry specific operations, we are seeing some challenge. So it will be kind of very interesting as if hopefully we'll double down on double click on that, not in this webinar. But no, we are seeing industries which are heavily regulated. Uh, they are very, very circumspect about adopting it. Within those industries, they are looking at HR and marketing. Some of those areas are getting prioritized in terms of taking to production, taking to scale. So it's kind of interesting result, but thanks for sharing. Okay, so with that, let me kind of move to the next part, which is the agentic AI, the next uh, evolution of AI, if you will. For sure, agentic AI can be truly transformative because not only it provides the intelligence, but it layers the autonomy and the decision making part of the picture, right? Having said that, our view is, at least for 2025, it's still going to be some pilots and POC. So where Gen AI was 2 years back, agentic AI is probably right now. Um, there are going to be experimentation, but we all need to recognize that the foundation for agentic AI is Gen AI, and that has to mature to a level where you can provide the degree of autonomy and decision making that we are comfortable with, right? In a enterprise setting, in a business setting. So again, the key point here is, again, it has a lot of promise, but at least from 2025 perspective, we expect it to progress, but we expect some of the foundational elements to strengthen before this particular aspect takes center stage. Okay, so Amit, we talked about the various, ways in which enterprises are going to capture value. Of course, there's a third party equation, the service provider equation. How do we see that happening?
Yeah. Uh, from what I've heard so far, enterprises' expectation from providers have increased a lot, haven't they, Rajesh? They want providers' support on GBase related activities, whether it be transformation or setup. They also want their support on IT ops integration and on GenAI implementation. But the question is, are providers being able to do that? Uh, when we if we move to the next slide, we will see that while service providers are definitely helping in optimizing the costs for their clients, but the support which is required uh, to transform their operations, to digitalize it, or the contribution that they should have to enterprises' top line growth is not really at par. And it is very evident from looking at the customer satisfaction score for the last 3 years, which is on our screens. When times were tough during the pandemic, which was back in 2020, 2021, enterprises' expectations were also low from their providers. They were majorly focused on must haves like on time service delivery, good quality of the service or product, etc. But since then, enterprises' expectations have grown a lot, as we have discussed so far. When we asked enterprises as to what could drive more satisfaction, majority of the enterprises mentioned that they would expect their providers to enable innovation via their offerings. So what their expectations are around innovation is that at a small scale, they would like to see the providers helping them increase process efficiency. Uh, and at the same time, at a large scale, they want the providers to take on initiatives like making the enterprise more business centric, the way Adisha discussed about platform and product led operating models. But there is definitely a disparity here, as providers are not being able to match up to the expectations or even the time and monetary investments which the enterprises are making to enable innovation in their organization. But apart from innovation, definitely there are other aspects like slow decision making and inconsistency in the performance levels, which are also not helping the cause of providers. Uh, all of this has also led to enterprises now looking at now moving away completely from vendor consolidation and focusing on either uh, rebalancing the scope of work, or they are looking at uh, introducing new providers. So this mediocre provider satisfaction that we spoke about in the previous slide is the reason behind enterprises planning to alter their provider portfolio. Uh, while the percentage of enterprises that expect to rebalance work almost remains the same as last year, the percentage of the ones that expect to include new providers has almost doubled from last year. And our study showcased that there's an inclination among enterprises to choose the rebalance of work for, let's say, IT and BP services, whereas they intend to focus on including new providers for services like engineering, R&D, and CX. So, apart from provider performance, yes, there are definitely other reasons which are leading enterprises to change their provider mix. One of them being the operational and cost efficiency, which comes with rebalancing the work or including new providers, and also their focus on getting new or niche skills which for which they seek different sort of providers, and hence the inclusion in their portfolio mix. Uh, Lastly, one other impact which all of this has had is on the size of the outsourcing deals. Uh, we saw in our initial discussion that the global services budget is expected to increase, uh, which shows that there is some sort of confidence among enterprises when it comes to the value that is being created with global services. But despite this confidence, we are seeing that enterprises plan to focus on shorter deal tenures. That is, deals with a duration of, let's say, 1 to 2 years or 3 to 4 years. And the reason behind this is the current priority which enterprises have to gain the most ROI, uh, or the instant ROI which comes with implementation of these services, instead of them waiting for gains that might come from long-term relationships. Rajesh.
No, absolutely, Amit. I think what there was one of the questions was, hey, why do we expect the deal sizes to increase? But I don't think we were kind of saying the deal size. We were saying that the global services industry is going to increase, right? But
Correct.
the
Yeah.
the deal size and duration, that is changing, and that we expect to kind of continue to change as enterprise seek to capture value quicker, faster, right? Okay,
Correct.
so that's pretty good. With that, why don't we kind of move to what all means in terms of the actions, right? So we are recommending 5 actions to prepare for 2025 to capture most value. As I said, as we saw earlier, as you heard, I think this rising optimism, again, it's not across the board, but in certain sectors, certain industries, certain geographies, on net basis, there's a sense of rising optimism. It's a great opportunity to capture more value through global services, not only the cost agenda, but also the innovation and the top line agenda. Unlocking accelerated value, as Alicia talking about, clearly requires a holistic IT ops integration. It requires creation of objective and key results, OKRs, which are common across these two organizations. So some of those silos need to be broken, and one should be kind of working to break those silos to kind of capture business value. Alicia again talked about what did not work, which came in the way of scaling Gen AI. Conversely, what it also tells us are the elements that we need to put in place, and those are the foundational element, right? How do we ensure that the data is in place? We have the right kind of data strategy. How do we ensure that we have the right kind of a yeah, business case in place, right? All the key elements, all the foundational, how do we ensure that the organization is ready, and we are putting all the effort that is needed, right, at the right places. So all that kind of goes back to strengthening the foundation. uh, Amit was kind of alluding to, right? There's kind of a sense of mixed satisfaction with service portfolio that I got. In some places I'm capturing a lot of values, other places I'm not. It requires reimagination to ensure that we capture most value while maintaining operational flexibility, right? The agility part of the equation, which Amita also alluded, the lack of agility on some of the service provider side is also kind of a cause of concern, which enterprises need to address. And as you're going to think about all of this, the point that we're trying to make is, hey, harness the power of and. It's not about, hey, GCC versus third party. And this is not about the silo of IT and ops, right? This is a combination, and hence our ability to harness the power of and is very, very important, right? So with that, uh, we have quite a few questions that have come our way. So why don't we kind of take some of them? I think let's start with this. Let me kind of take this question. I think this question came along is, to what extent is the team expecting supplier consolidation, rationalization strategy to feature on the agenda in 2025? I think, Amit, you already
Yeah.
answered that question. So I think we can move to the other one. Uh, okay, so let me kind of see. Okay, this is interesting. One of the question is how do you foresee the adoption of Gen AI impacting the balance between in-house capabilities and outsourcing strategies for enterprise in 2025, especially in terms of cost optimization, innovation potential? Alicia, do you want to take that up?
Yeah, sure. That's an interesting question, Rajesh. I think fortunately, unfortunately, the answer is again, it depends, because whether or not enterprises want to do it in house or whether they want to work with an outsourcing service provider, the verdict isn't still out. The fact of the matter is, organizations right now are preparing for what they need to lay the foundation to invest in generative AI at scale. And we are seeing both sides of the spectrum, largely those who are, on one side there are those who are investing on their own, say, very large enterprises like a Bloomberg or a JP Morgan and others who are investing in house and building their own capabilities. There are also those who are preparing their GCCs for some of the strategic initiatives and preparing them with a Gen AI specific COE to drive some of the innovations. But at the same time, we are also seeing massive investments by the service partners, by the technology partners, all of them, to help enterprises in adopting some of the foundational capabilities customized to their industries or customized to the processes. And there are tremendous amount of POCs and also some small scale initiatives that all of these service providers are working on. So it's a mixed bag right now. When it comes to cost and some of the other outcomes, I think that will depend upon the kind of use case we're talking about. Certain use case will be focused around customer experience. Certain use cases, maybe certain from an IT standpoint, would be focused around productivity and cost improvement. So it's not a one size fits all answer. So as I said, it depends. But I think it's going to be a mix of everything depending upon individual client situation.
Understood. Understood. Okay, so moving on to the next question. Okay, I think we partly answered it, but there's a question that came along. Do we see service industry getting impacted with US tariff? Reason is to bring jobs back to US. I think we addressed it. Actually, we don't see much impact. In fact, in certain places we see net positive impact. Again, we talked about Gen AI and AI. Um, Regulations can come in a big way to potentially decelerate the momentum. At least in the US, with the new regime, there's a sense that there's going to be more deregulation. Now, this deregulation can happen in multiple directions, but hey, we believe that something is going to be net positive for Gen AI momentum and associated services and all those things that you can offer. That's deregulation will also be beneficial in some of the more regulated industry like BFS. Uh, in the previous regime also, we saw that some of these tariffs and other initiative impacted manufacturing, less on services. So if you talk about the IT and business process services, we don't expect that to have a meaningful impact. The fact that a lot of the service provider at least also established a lot of their centers in the previous regime. So it's not like, everyone is kind of working from offshore. Of course, there are going to be some display. In fact, we have put out a point of view on the likely impact of US administration on IT BPS industry. We have not published it, but we'll be happy to kind of share if someone wants to kind of reach out to us. Okay. Okay, let's kind of move to other question. Well, this was interesting. Someone say, hey, why isn't one of the responses none nowhere on the Gen AI poll question? Right? Actually, it's a very good point. Thanks for pointing out. Probably we should have. Next time we will. Uh, because yeah, I mean, I'm sure if there are the failure rate is, I don't know whether to call it failure rate, but non-movement of 70% odd cases to production, right? I'm sure there are enterprises where we don't have any scaled use cases, scaled adoption. So that's a fair point. It's a point that someone made. It's a fair point. Let's see what we time. Can we take one or two quick question? I think we can, right? Okay, so let's see. Okay. Yeah, this question is probably, Alicia, I'm going to direct to you again. In terms of technology adoption for 2025, what key factors are influencing enterprises' decision to invest in new capabilities versus upgrading existing systems?
Yeah, so in terms of factors that enterprises are thinking when it comes to investing in new capabilities versus upgrading their existing systems, I think it's essentially to do with the end outcome that they're trying to achieve. Is it around cost efficiency? Is it around driving growth, etc.? Depending upon that, a large part of it is to do with the kind of talent that's available out there, and do they need to upgrade it? Do they need to, do they have them accessible, and can they use some of that talent available from the industry? um, I think those are some of the key factors that we believe is playing a role.
Okay. Okay. I think we can just squeeze in one more question if we can. Well, this says, while agentic AI seems to be much closer, any comments on AGI seeming to be closer than expected with increased focus on Gen AI? Let me kind of take it up, Alicia. Again, actually, I would say that agentic AI from an enterprise B2B context is not very close, right? That's the point that we are making, right? Yes, it has a lot of promise, potential. It can be truly transformative, but as we have seen, even in the standard use case of applying it to customer service, as you saw, only 30% of the enterprise saying that they have been able to kind of scale it in some form, right? So even what it means is when we try to apply that in large organization, there are a lot of elements that need to be in place. One of the big issues with Gen AI is still around hallucination. Unless we kind of address some of those issues, we cannot let the next version to kind of come along. Again, we are not naysayer. We are technology analysts. We believe in technology, but we also need to be practical about how organizations think about it, adopt it, and take it to scale. So it's a good question, but I
To
think
add
the
one quick
AGI
point there,
conversation is premature. Yeah.
just one quick point there. I think, Rajesh, some of the recent investments by large tech providers has given a lot of positive push towards establishing this foundation. I was reading about Amazon Nova, for example, that was just recently announced at reInvent. While we may argue it has come in slightly late as compared to some of AWS's peers, but it's targeted at the right areas. It's targeted for the right audience. It's possibly, targeted for the right kind of use cases, which, to your point, establishing the foundation, addressing some of the key challenges, that's what enterprises will now start decluttering. What has happened over the last 2 years is a lot of clutter around possibilities and promises and all of that. Now, in the year 2025, they'll be just focusing on, we'll most likely narrow down to very few set of use cases that will actually scale, which will lay the foundation for a lot of agentic AI in the coming years.
Yeah, well said. Well said. So, folks, we are actually out of time. Again, thanks very much for attending it. Again, just to repeat the offer, complimentary report curated for your department. Again, the link was shared, slightly delayed when I was mentioning, it was shared a little bit delayed because of some technical issues on our side. Please take that offer. Again, that particular report will be shared sometime in mid-January.